Welcome to this British Chess Championship preview for 2016. I'm International Master Andrew Martin and I'll be managing the live commentary taking place at the Bournemouth Pavilion. The championships are taking place between the 24th of July and the 6th of August at the Bournemouth Pavilion, and to date we have had 843 entrants. There's still time to enter, just a couple of weeks left, so do go to the British Chess Championships website and place your entry. Of course, Bournemouth is a nice holiday venue, so perfect for families who want to combine a bit of chess entering their own age group tournaments with a proper holiday for the kids. Well, in the championship itself, there are 76 players so far. I've no doubt that number will swell. Thanks to some extra sponsorship this year, we have 10 Grandmasters, including players of the calibre of Mickey Adams, David Howe and Gawain Jones. But of course, just right behind them, we have the chasing group, including players like Nick Pert and Mark Hebden. So any one of these players could actually win the championship. It's a rather open tournament this year if they have a good event and are on good form. So we're really looking forward to a very tightly contested championship. If I had to summarise one quality which typifies the modern game, I would say it is relentlessness. And players of the calibre of Howe and Mickey Adams have this quality in abundance. So just to whet the appetite for the tournament, let's see a David Howe game, which he played against the formidable Danny Gormally, and this game was played in the 4NCL in 2015. And it's an interesting one because it features a theoretical duel in one of Howe's favourite opening lines, the Grunfeld defence. Grunfeld, a very fluid opening. Black opens up the game quickly and tries to put pressure on White's centre. White chooses the exchange variation, and this is possibly the most highly theoretical line of all, with White taking the centre and Black having to find accurate ways to destabilise the centre, mostly involving the move c5. In general, Black tends to play this move sooner rather than later in most Grunfeld positions. As you can see, Black's putting pressure on d4. There are other systems where Black plays with knight c6 and maybe even e5, but these are very rare when we compare it with c5. So this is an indispensable move for Grunfeld practitioners. And Gormally plays knight to e2. And I think this is the right place for the knight in this system for two reasons. With pressure mounting on d4, White doesn't want the move bishop g4 to be annoying. So knight e2 sets up the possibility of f3 should Black ever contemplate playing bishop g4. That's usually a pretty effective response to bishop g4. In addition, later on, Black might want to play the move f4. In fact, we'll see that in one of the illustrative games I'm going to feature a bit later on this video. And with this move, White can start up a big kingside attack. So the knight is not obstructing the f-pawn. So knight e2, that is the main line here. White's maintaining his centre. Black hits d4, White defends, and both sides castle. All very much main line. Now we reach a critical position. Well, there are various moves which have had their moment in the sun here. This is a very common situation. And Black has plenty of choice. For instance, he can play queen c7. That's Smyslov's variation. And the idea is to play a quick rook d8. Again, maintaining the pressure against d4. And there are certainly veiled threats against this bishop on c4. So queen c7 is one line. I mean, this is all very much a question of taste as to what you want to play. The old main line involves the immediate capture on d4, followed by bishop g4. And we said earlier that this move could be seen to be ineffective due to f3. Well, Black's idea is to go knight a5. And again, we reach some very sharp situations. Again, very theoretical. White can take on f7, the Seville variation, debated so extensively by Karpov and Kasparov. He can play bishop d3. There are exchange sacrifices in the air. That is just another variation. And then there's the so-called improved main line with bishop g4 straight away. And now after f3, knight a5. This may or may not transpose into the line we just looked at. Kasparov used to use this line a lot with black. Going back, Howe's choice is a fourth idea, the quiet bishop d7. And as you can see from the notes, which I've appended, it's Peter Svidler, the great Grunfeld specialist, who has almost made a career out of this line. Black basically is putting development before everything else, waiting constructively and connecting his major pieces. Now the thing is that this move looks rather slow. It takes the pressure off d4, but White has really found no definite way to exploit it, or even get a slight edge against it. What we now basically get is a complicated middle game where Black is keeping some flexibility in his position and he's waiting to see what White's going to do before he chooses moves such as rook c8 or queen a5. Those will be the next things on his mind. Well, White could play rook b1, but Gormali sticks with queen to d2. The usual sort of idea, and with this move he says, well, I'm going to play bishop h6 and strip out your bishop. Once the bishop on g7 leaves the board, Black's whole position tends to have a lot less oomph about it. But Howe plays queen to a5, and that's a very accurate rejoinder. And the first point of this move is that if White goes bishop h6, Black's going to take on d4. And that is a little bit awkward for White. As if he trades on g7, Black takes back, and now White's got to take back with the knight, leaving him with a very weak pawn on c3. So that's why White protects his queen. Now, just dropping back, it may be that Black can play another move here. And there was a game of Peter Svidler, very interesting game, which he played against Pruzikin in Germany 2002, where Black played rook c8 first. Again, with veiled threats against this bishop. So that's why White plays rook c1. And only now Svidler played queen a5. This is a slightly surprising game because it looks as though White's game is perfectly all right for quite a long time. Then it suddenly collapses and falls apart. Well, White played queen to b2. I mean, I don't know whether that's the best move. It looks slightly uncomfortable to me. And Black easily dealt with the threat to b7 by pushing his pawn up to b6. And here we go, White played f4. The move e6 puts the brakes on White's attack. And so both sides centralised their rooks. And now comes pawn takes pawn. Well, I wonder whether White underestimated Black's next move, which was very good. Bishop f8. Bit unexpected for those who perhaps are not familiar with this variation. Black places emphasis on tactical operations rather than just mechanically capturing that pawn. The idea is, should White take on b6, well, there are moves like bishop to a3 in the air. So Pruzikin played queen to b5, and now Svidler took on c5. And after takes, rook b1. Again, it doesn't look as though there's an enormous amount going on here. So bishop e8 was answered by queen takes queen. Svidler took on d1, and now took on a5, and White went bishop b3. And now Black played rook b8. Still looks rather level, but there are some issues for White. The first issue is that his pawn structure is a bit ragged. So this enables Black to come in and attack those pawns quite quickly. There's an immediate threat to b3, which White's got to deal with. And when the bishop moves, the Black rook maybe can penetrate to the 7th rank. So White defends the bishop, and Black takes advantage of the pinned bishop by going knight c4, threatening knight d2, which White defends against. And now the knight comes in to harry the White rook. And suddenly, from a position where there was nothing going on, there's plenty going on, as c4 guarantees the entry of the Black rook into the game. And I've no doubt at all that Pruzikin was shocked how quickly his position fell apart. Because after rook b2, he's now in a horrible pin. If he goes knight d4, we go bishop a4. He tried rook d8, but now the calm move, king f8, actually did the business for Black. And White actually resigned. Now, why does he resign? Well, the thing is that his position is completely bust, unless he tries bishop a4. But after that, I think Black just takes on e2. And whether White takes on e8 or not, with the rook or the bishop, the problem for him is that he's got irreparable weaknesses on his 7th rank. So Svidler's rook is just going to have a sort of field day there, picking up loose White pawns. And rather than be tormented for a long period in that type of endgame, white decided to resign. So that was an interesting example of this line in practice. And going back to Gormally, how we rejoined the game with Gormally protecting his queen. And now Howe just trades down. So off comes the pawns in the centre, off come the queens, and now rook fc8. Rook comes to b1, the knight goes to a5, bishop d3, and now e6. And the scene is set here for a typical Grunfeld middle game. It looks about equal, but it's not at all dry. In fact, this position had been seen quite a few times before this game, so the players were still repeating theory. The thing is, you have to judge these positions quite carefully because white's got a central pawn majority, and he's looking forward to perhaps creating a passed pawn in the centre with a typical advanced d5. Meanwhile, black's got the usual Grunfeld advantage of the queenside pawn majority, and is thinking about getting all the pieces off and enjoying a nice pawn ending with those outside potential passed pawns to create. So it's a sharp middle game and not at all dry. So white went f3 and black went a6. Now Gormally plays a new move here, king to f2. But I mean, okay, that was the first time this move had been played, but it's hardly original. Black just trying to mount pressure on the queen side. White's bringing his king into the action. Previously, rook b6 had been seen, and now comes bishop b5. A rather good move, rendering the rook rather useless. After the further d5, e takes d5, takes, rook c2. Black was certainly better and went on to win in Kula versus Mališauskas in 2009. Hence king f2. And black went b5. White went rook c2. Howe was happy to trade, and now the knight came into c4. In general, as I say, trades tend to favour black, all things being equal here, because of his queenside pawn majority. And in fact here, white's got to surrender one of his bishops, as if he moves his bishop back to c1, rook c8 is a little bit awkward to meet, and after bishop b3, just h6, and white is getting stuck for moves. It's easier for black to improve his position than it is for white. So Gormally doesn't like that. He gives up his bishop. Howe is happy to take it off, and now a key move, e5. And that will guarantee the entry of the dark square bishop into the game. As if white pushes forward, which he probably wants to do, now bishop f8. And it's not out of the question that black could put pressure on white's king here. So Gormally doesn't like that. He takes the file. Black plays rook to d8. And white takes on e5. Another perhaps surprising move, but of course that does guarantee Gormally a lasting majority there on the king side. Now once again, this is a position where you ask yourself, well, what happens if white pushes the pawn on? I think black would then play rook to c8. We get a capture. I don't think there's better for white. White starts to get his own majority together. But I think black's definitely better after king e7. And this is the sort of position black's hoping for in the exchange Grunfeld. There's no question of an attack for white. Black's got the passed pawn on d5 fully under control. He's got the two bishops and the queenside pawn majority. Well, for a great technician like David Howe, I'm sure he'd be very pleased to work with all these small advantages in the endgame to come. And the thing is, Gormally would have not really wanted to enter into this position against Howe because he knows he's going to have to sit there for hours just defending a slightly inferior endgame. And this is a horrible fate. So white decides to chop on e5. Black takes back. White goes f4. Black goes bishop b8. And after knight c3, black finds a way to get his dark square bishop into the game. King d2. And now comes f5. Again, a sharp move. White can't take that pawn. He can push forward, but that reduces the elasticity of his position. For instance, e5, bishop e6. Black's building up a lot of pressure. Well, Gormally played knight to d5. Howe took on e4, opening up the game for the bishops, and king to f8. It's worth pointing out that if Black plays bishop e6 here, which looks very strong, Gormally's idea is now to play king e2. Black temporarily wins a piece on d5, but then check, check, and the capture on a7. This has got to be a draw, with White's rook very active. So that's White's idea. Hence, king to f8. King to e2. Well, it's little moments like this that tend to win games at a very high level. And looking at this with a computer, I found that knight f6 was supposed to be best for White. But of course that is a very difficult move to play, as White now has to brave discovered checks. It is surprising that Black can't take advantage of the fact that he can give a discovered check here, but apparently he can't. And one of the points is that if he goes bishop g4 check, there's a very surprising move here, bishop d5, found by the machine. And this is tough to spot, you know. And of course, the thing is that White is relying on the fact this bishop on g4 is on pre. Funny position. If bishop b8 here, we unpin. He attacks the knight. We go rook c6. In this line, of course, I mean, it's virtually impossible for a human to spot because all your pieces are hanging in the air. We get a check. Turns out that White can survive amazingly. Well, going back, it's no surprise to me that Gormally just plays king e2. Very human move, getting out of the potential pin. But this runs into check. And now bishop e6. White went rook to c7. Howe put his bishop in on d4. That bishop's very powerful, controlling most of the key squares. White saved his knight. There came a check. And then bishop to b6. And suddenly White's pieces are uncoordinated. And he can't rescue the situation. There are just too many pieces under fire. So rook c6 was answered by rook takes d3. This is pretty much the killer blow. White's got to take, Black recaptures. There was a check, of course. The two bishops are now boss in coordination with the queenside pawn majority. And that's exactly what happened. The time control was reached and White resigned. Doesn't fancy being toyed with in this endgame. And theoretically speaking, of course, another great victory for Black. And you can see the reason why they tend to play this line in favour of the other lines which I mentioned earlier. So that's the type of skill and relentlessness which David Howe brings to bear on the chessboard, and which makes him one of the favourites for this year's British Championship. So 2 weeks to go. We look forward to your entry. We look forward to the pleasure of your company in Bournemouth, and hopefully I'll see you in one of the commentaries there, personally myself. So thank you for viewing.